Oh, well, good to have you back, Maria. We're gonna kind of dive in, but maybe we should do like a brief recap on what we talked about. Gosh, was it like a month ago now?
Yes, almost a month ago, and I look forward for us to keep doing those things in the near future
Yeah,
too.
absolutely. So just to put this little teaser out there for everybody joining, Maria and I are gonna make this a regular. We've aimed for the last Thursday of the month, 5 p.m. 5 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Central. So hopefully that's a good time. People can make it. And as we're kind of having this discussion, we encourage you just to reach out, drop your comments, drop your questions in. We're definitely going to be answering those as we see them pop up. So let's kind of recap what we talked about last time, Maria, because we kind of got into kind of the metabolic piece of things and gut piece of things from specifically like a stress standpoint and how like chronically elevated stress hormones like cortisol can impact people's ability to lose weight, have healthy hormone levels as far as sex hormones go, and then, why that can drive more digestive symptoms in the gut. So why don't you kind of give a recap on the hormones
You
and
just did. What you just did. I don't think we need to say anything else, but yes, I think that, it's available for anybody to watch, right?
yeah, totally.
And catch up. And we discuss a lot about functional lab testing and how also helps us to identify the concerns that are symptoms yes, the symptoms are a lot of us and a lot of people that we work with, they have significant, issues in their gut and metabolic health and hormone health. And the side effects and the symptoms are, okay, I cannot lose weight, I'm gaining weight, or I feel, exhausted all the time, or I feel even wired and tired. And then obviously there is the more chronic issues, like you work a lot with individuals with IBS and IBD. I work with them too, but that's your specialty as well. So, well, most individuals have little idea how much this stress is causing this because we're kind of accustomed, right, we normalize what stress is. And if we're not like everybody else, all of a sudden there is something wrong with us. Well, we are kind of pointing out last time, maybe we don't want to be like anybody else because the symptoms are there. So we highlighted the facts that let's pay attention to how the body is speaking, you know, let's time out and give ourselves a chance to pay attention and then dive in with data about your body,
Yeah.
right? Is there anything else that you want to add to that?
No, but I think this is going to segue into kind of our main topic today because we're going to talk a lot about diet and the role that plays in kind of metabolic flexibility as well as gut health. But I will say this, Maria, like high stress hormones, the number one thing that happens from the digestive system front is that stomach acid production goes down, enzyme production goes down, right? Like all digestive function basically gets put on the back burner. And so if we aren't properly digesting food, that sets the stage for all kinds of problems, like for the gut
Mm-hmm.
in the intestines especially, right? So where that ultimately tends to lead people then is troubleshooting their diet, which is kind of where we're making,
Mm-hmm.
right? And a lot of people that reach out to you and me, especially if they're more proactive, they're looking for natural solutions, they're interested in a diet and lifestyle based approach. They're doing their own research and they're coming across a ton of different diets, right?
Yes.
Where things can sometimes start to go down very specific rabbit holes.
Mm-hmm.
Although a lot of the diets, we'll touch on some of them in our discussion today, have some positive aspects. This is where really having somebody who can help guide you at a much more expert level
Mm-hmm.
can be useful because although I am a fan of elimination diets, I think they have to be done very strategically and specifically.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately, a person should find that sweet spot of avoiding the foods that are their biggest triggers while still expanding their diet if possible. So yeah, should we kind of dive in, Maria, on that topic?
Yes, I think it's a great topic because we see that a lot these days, right? I mean, in the carnivore diet or the low carb diet, which is almost basically the carnivore diet. And there is the old folks like Atkins and so on. But I think, how about we talk about the carnivore diet because it's such on the news, right?
Yeah.
And, I will say this, the carnivore diet has its benefits, right?
Mhm.
Because imagine somebody who is eating fast foods every day and eating very inflammatory foods. And so we know what are inflammatory foods, right? They are foods that actually trigger inflammation in the body. And the most common ones are, the seed oils that we hear on the news quite a bit. We also see dairy as inflammatory. We see gluten, wheat, added sugars, not the natural sugars, but the added sugars. We see vegetable oils, which are the seed oils, and several other things, but those are the most common ones, in addition to even corn, which people love corn in this country, but
Mm-hmm.
most of it's the GMO. So is the soy, and vegans rely a lot on soy as well. And so a lot of these foods, that people are eating could be creating inflammation, which we're going to dive in inflammatory
Yep.
markers in a minute here. But once you stop eating those things, and you go into eating protein, which is an amazing food with all essential amino acids, that the body needs for every cell, well, they get amazing results. Well, that's fantastic. Is there potentially a consequence in the long term?
Right.
And we kind of see that in our work when we look at the digestion.
Right.
And I'll be glad to add more information, but do you want to pick up from here?
Yeah.
Let you give your take from there.
Yeah, no, I agree with all of that. And I think kind of what you're saying, Maria, is like all of these diets inherently, which is in most of them, have more of a whole foods, unprocessed foods approach, right? So that's the other kind of category of foods, like all of the additives, the colorings, the flavorings, the hydrogenated oils, all of that stuff, right? That goes into processed foods. And I should put this little tidbit out there too. Some people don't know this, but our own government subsidizes corn and soy. Like those are
Oh,
the two most subsidized foodstuffs in the United States. So it's extremely cheap to process those things and put them into foods of all sorts, right? As like
and
filler.
so is sugar.
Yes,
Sugar.
sugar. Yeah, yes, absolutely. So like, we won't go too far down that rabbit hole, but just understand that you really have to get good at reading labels,
Some reason I
know
cannot
what's in.
hear you. Hold on a
Oh,
second.
can you hear me?
Let me see if there is anything wrong here.
Can you still hear me, Maria?
Okay. All right.
I
Can you speak?
can,
Okay.
yeah.
Got it. I can hear you now.
Okay.
Sorry. I'm not sure.
No,
Yeah.
it's all good. It's all good. But yeah, no, I mean, there's a lot of those like ingredients in the center aisle stores of the grocery store where the majority of processed foods are. So, kind of generally that's sort of the area of shopping that you have to be careful of. But yes, the other point you're starting to make is even though people see benefits by cutting out the worst offending foods, the problem is, especially on a carnivore diet, they're cutting out a major macronutrient group, which is
Mm-hmm.
carbohydrates, right? And
Mm-hmm.
we feel like in the nutritional space, at least I'm sure you'll agree with this, but like carbs tend to get a bad rap, and I think it's because a lot of the foods people think of as carbs, like pizza and
Yes.
pasta and what, like these starchy, often ultra refined forms of carbohydrates that have all these problems that come with them, right? But just
Right.
realize foods like fruits and vegetables and potatoes and, like root vegetables, right? Like those are all carbohydrate rich foods that
Right.
are appropriate foods or sources of carbohydrate that are also very nutrient dense. And
Yes.
so maybe I'll hand it back to you because I think you can kind of go into like why carbohydrates are so important to regulate the metabolism appropriately.
Yeah. Yeah. First of all, when we start removing these carbohydrates, and it's funny is because every time I start with a new client, right,
Mm-hmm.
and I talk about proteins, carbs, and fats, and I have to specify what carbs in my language are,
Yeah,
and I said, by the way, carbs, when I speak about carbs, I'm talking about vegetables and fruits.
totally.
Because yes, when we hear the word carbs, we think about exactly what you just said. They put fruits and vegetables as a different category. Let's kind of put that category back in. And in some instances, depending on how much weight the person wants to lose, I actually substitute the word carbs for fiber, because
Mm-hmm.
that's where we find, where do we find the fiber? In vegetables and fruits,
For sure.
and then we kind of remove some of the complex carbs that you mentioned that are like the root vegetables, I call them more substance, that actually help us,
Right.
obviously, to especially gain some muscle after we lift heavy at the gym. But when we start, removing this food category, it's going to create a problem, especially when it comes to hormones,
Mm-hmm.
okay? Because let's think about this. So imagine here that you wake up in the morning, and actually a lot of people go into the fasting, which we can get into it. You know, they wake up and and we're talking to high achievers over here too, right? Most of our community are people who are type A and they want to go. You and I want to go. So we're right there with them, right? Yes, yet. So you go into a fasting mode, you get up, you take care of the kids, whatever the heck is going on, and then you go to work and goes on meetings and this and traffic and whatever the hell is going on. And there is no food going on. Is that a problem? Well, maybe not, but a lot of times, yes. Why? Because the body is looking for nutrients to do what? It needs nutrients, you know, to get up you to speed. So that's what the cortisol is. Cortisol levels that we mentioned last time, you know, that we measure 4 times in the day minimum, you know. So it gives us an indication of energy throughout the day and yada, yada. And well, this cortisol needs some glucose. So if it doesn't see circulating in the body, what's going to do? Well, I'm going to go look for someplace else in the body. And likes the most is our muscle. You know, our muscles store glucose from amino acids. So sometimes it could be destroying your own muscles. And then we go on, you know, until noon, maybe 11 without eating, and we have no freaking idea. We're thinking we're doing good, but then in the end of the day, we're probably not. And this is especially true for women, because we women are a little different than men. And actually, there's a study, I don't remember the year now, but if anybody's interested, send me a note. That was done that's saying, hey, early kind of fasting, you know, or time restricted diet, which time restricted diet basically is the time that you're going to eat during the day. And the early mean that you stop eating earlier in the day is actually very beneficial for insulin resistance, which, you know, another topic we can get into it, but basically our cells are not responding well, you know, to the glucose going on. The glucose doesn't get to the cells to generate ATP, which is energy, right? So, well, it does well for insulin resistance, but as long as we are in we have a good circadian rhythm, which is also good cortisol levels. And I have not worked with one client yet who is not out of whack.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly.
Out of whack, where the cortisol could be super elevated or actually to the tank. Is very rare to find somebody who is like perfect. I'm not even perfect. Okay. I'm still there. You know, you see what I'm saying? So yeah, that is a concern. Do you have anything to add on that? I mean, do you see quite a bit of that too, right?
I do, Maria. And because I focus more on kind of gut health and people with like over digestive disorders, it's not as frequent that I get people that are doing intermittent fasting. However, I will tell you, I've had those clients. And I will also tell you, sometimes the people I work with are feeling so ill, they have trouble eating, you know, appropriate meals at the right times because they can't digest their food. I mean, that's a whole other problem. But what I will say is the brain actually prefers to run on glucose. And so what's
Correct.
interesting is, from what I've seen, people that swear up and down that they feel better intermittent fasting, I think what's actually going on is their entire metabolism is down regulating.
Mm-hmm.
And we're talking more so extreme versions of it, like where the body's stress hormones like cortisol are not regulated, blood sugar's not stable, right? Like going those stretches time they're not eating, their body's actually going into a stress state because it's like we need fuel, and we're not getting it, right?
Mm-hmm.
I feel like what can happen is it becomes the new norm, and then
Yes.
they don't even necessarily recall what it felt like to have like good energy in the tank, or maybe they went from being dysregulated and having, you know, bad sugar handling on a more standard diet to suddenly the intermittent fasting, and they don't even really know what a proper
Yes.
sugar should be. So yeah, that's kind of interesting to me. But I can also say that to have good thyroid function, you need to have a certain amount of carbohydrate too.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. There is data also suggesting that, you know, a low carb diet will impact leptin levels, which is our fat hormone saying, hey, I'm full over here, stop eating, part of it, right? Storage of fat. And also T3 hormone, which is a thyroid active hormone. You know, oftentimes, you know, we're not going to get into a tangent, but all individuals think about thyroid hormone as TSH, which there is several other hormones that actually we kind of help our clients to identify, hey, there is more, or there is more on the blood work over here other than the TSH. And those things, if they're not evaluated, if they're not captured in a blood work, people have no idea, and they could be even misdiagnosed by a physician, because of the TSH, which is a thyroid stimulating hormone. But there is true hormones that are active and inactive on the thyroid. So yes, the carbs can impact, or too little carbs can impact that, especially if somebody's working out again, right? Because of the stress levels that raise. And if we're not feeling the muscles and feeling the body afterwards, it can be a problem on that. So yeah, it's kind of controversial items,
Yeah.
right? That we're talking about here, but they're realistic and we kind of see all the time.
Yeah.
And part of our jobs is to help people get awareness
Right.
that, hey, it's working here, but you're coming for help because it's not working entirely. So let's dive into all the scenarios that could be happening. And I believe that food is in this earth for a reason, right? It's not only for animals to feed themselves, but we are animals as well. So they have a rule, they have a place.
Yeah.
And is I don't like to use the word balance when it comes to foods, because people are physiologically are different, and we also use the data from functional lab testing, blood work, and things like that to identify the gaps that potentially are missing. So might need more of this and that, yet I don't believe on extreme diets like that. It's going to create problems sooner or later,
Absolutely, Maria. And it's interesting because like many years ago, I followed Paul Saladino, who kind of originally dubbed him Carnivore MD. Now I think he's just Paul Saladino MD. And is there some logic to the idea of using an elimination diet that removes a lot of the antigenic foods, which do tend to be plant-based foods, right? It can often be nuts and seeds and specific things like nightshades in the diet. For IBS, IBD, it can be FODMAP containing foods. Most of these foods in reality are carbohydrates. However, and that's where I think the autoimmune kind of camp can start to go that direction. But he's even come out and said in recent years publicly that like he kind of retracts his early approach to that and now includes raw dairy and fruit, I believe at least, and honey in the diet. And like looking at some of these like tribes he's gone and like experimented with living with, some of these like subsist on like meat and honey at least as a bare minimum. So the honey right there is providing at least some fast burning glucose. So like, yeah, and kind of back to your point about the testing, the other thing I was just going to mention that I think is so interesting is sometimes when we run a functional stool test like the GI map, we'll actually see clues that not only might there be problems breaking down carbohydrates, but we can see clues that there might be protein digestion issues, or that actually comes from the Dutch test, right? The indican marker Dutch. Or we can get an indicator based on fat content. We call that marker steatocrit in the stool, that marker map, whether or not we've got some bile production issues. So can you imagine if the person you're working with is on something like a carnivore diet, it's all protein, all fat, they got steatocrit, right? Like their indican is like 100 on the touch. Like that diet is actually creating inflammation for them, whether they realize it or not, just simply because they're having trouble digesting protein and fat. So, that's where we can bust through sometimes some of these common assumptions or myths that people walking in the door have. Not to say we don't want to have enough protein and fat, we do, but sometimes there's a lot going on more than meets the eye. And that's where doing this testing can give us such a clear perspective on this isn't just a carbohydrate digestion problem. Like you've actually got this and this potentially going on too, right?
Oh yeah. And I see this quite a bit actually on the keto folks, I want to say, which again, nothing wrong with it to a certain degree. There's different kind of ketogenic diets out there, right? Are people really measuring the ketones, or they're just going and cutting the fast foods again? Similar to similar to the carnivore diet, right?
Right.
So, but I see tremendous dysbiosis, which is an imbalance between good bacteria and bad bacteria, in the gut. We see drastic, low levels of the good bacteria called keystone bacteria in the gut, which then eventually, oh boy, starts creating a lot of problems. It creates a soil. Now imagine a tree that the soil is very poor. What kind of fruits is going to grow? Well, not going to grow as many. And then eventually the bugs can come into that trunk, you know, and that's what we see eventually with kind of extreme diets like that, because the body is seeking, and also the gut microbiome is pretty smart. And it starts actually favoring things that it actually is being given. So all of a sudden, you know, it's asking more and more, craving more of those foods, because the bugs actually adjust to it. And I'm calling the bacteria as bugs, right? And some people say, no, I don't need this, or I don't have this. And it says, hold on a second, it's an adaptation that the body is doing to survive. And you might not know that. And when we see the test result, we see these extreme low levels, and this is potentially already creating some symptoms. They're not correlating to, because they don't know, I mean, the individual, but it can lead to significant problems. In addition to what you're saying about they're not potentially digesting or absorbing the carbs, the fats, and the proteins they're eating, you know? So that to me is number one when I see that in the test. Hey, whatever you put in your mouth, let's make sure that you're breaking down, that your body can absorb.
Right.
So, right?
Exactly, Maria. Well, and the other thought that kind of comes up in this conversation is like, have you ever had a client say like, oh no, I prefer staying on carnivore for the rest of my life to manage this problem? Like, I don't have a lot of clients like say, yes, I had to eat 20 foods, that would be my preference. You know, like, I think most of us have some sort of like social context, like emotional pleasure context around foods. Like, what I always tell my clients is like, my goal is to get you to as broad a diet as possible. Like, are you going to be able to eat every food by the time we're done working? Probably not if you've got IBS and ABD. Your gut is definitely going to be more on the sensitive end, likely a little bit more compromised than the average person. And some of this is just the way our genetic potentials come out to, you know, from go. But we will do everything we can to restore that function so that you can tolerate more foods. And I think with carnivore, especially, like, I think it can feel exciting, kind of like, you know, the South Beach diet or some of these others. It's like, yeah, I'm on this bandwagon, and, you know, there's all these different Facebook groups and support systems out there for it, which can kind of carry people into this high for a while. But after that sets in for like 3, 4, 5, 6 months, like, I don't know, like, that would get really old for me, I think, psychologically.
Yeah, some people are doing for many, many years, right? The bottom line, folks, is I love to eat. I don't know about you, Courtney, but I enjoy eating. And we can actually this could be a good segue to being, you know, adaptable, to having what is called metabolic flexibility. And, you know, so many people, and first of all, let me define what metabolic flexibility is, right? Is think about in a simple ways is the body ability to shift between burning carbs and burning fat. So you can live your life, right? So there, you know, naturally the body should be doing one or the other based on what we have available. So, you know, if we are always on a diet that is a non-vegetable or no complex carbs, like it is, for example, a carnivore diet, boy, if you go on vacation and you really would like to try something that is high carb, even if it is a darn fruit, that is a tropical fruit. Now you go to, I don't know, Costa Rica, which I love that place, you know, rice and beans and, you know, yuca, and then fruits, amazing stuff. Well, are you going to go there and you're not going to eat it? Or you're going to freak out about your blood sugar being through the roof? Right. Because that's most likely what's going to be, because the body is not adapting to shift between carbs and fats, right? Exactly. And there is that extreme, you know, but then there is the other extreme, which is the majority of our clients, I believe, that come in that are basically just burning carbs. They don't have the shift, you know, they haven't taught basically their bodies to go into burning fat. Why? Because they're eating multiple times a day, and the composition of their foods are not really great, meaning that number of carbs versus proteins and fats are way higher. And most people, I mean, they have absolutely no clue what is that they're eating and the macronutrients. So, they keep going. And then when they go into, a place that they don't have food for maybe 4 hours, they're freaking out.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, for sure. Like, this is just making me think about too, I think a big problem, and this is more of like a social problem or cultural problem, is a lot of people are getting away from cooking at home too. And so in doing that, we're moving more towards like quick prep meals. And you might see this with your female clients, but I still see this too quite a bit, like a lot of salads as an entire meal, right? And I
Oh,
mean, a
yeah.
salad here, but when I'm often looking at food journals with clients, like the biggest macronutrient, in my opinion, that's lacking is healthy fats. To the extent that I'll ask them, like, when you're prepping your vegetables, like, how are you cooking them? And like 9 times out of 10, there's no healthy fat with that
Mm-hmm.
veggie. And then I have to educate them and say, you do realize you need fat to absorb the fat soluble vitamins in these vegetables, right? And funny story, like if I ever go back to my parents' house and cook in their kitchen, like they're always like, it smells like cooked cabbage in here. What is that smell? Because I'm cooking it in coconut oil and you're gonna smell it, right? Like they don't use like stovetop like oil, like fat-based cooking. And so it's kind of funny. I don't do it anymore, Maria, but like that's kind of the culture that we're in.
Yeah.
And the culture I grew up in, it was like very much convenience, like frozen veggies in a
Yeah.
bag, boil them. And then there's like the country crock tub of butter. And I don't even know if it's real butter, honestly, because we had the can't believe it's not butter when I was growing up too, right? Just sitting on the dinner table.
Yeah.
So you're supposed to take a knife and like slab that stuff on there. And like, it's like, but, and we're joking and laughing. This is like fun for us as nutritionists. Like, not everybody might be aware of this, like, but really, like, I think this is just kind of where we've gone as a culture, and people don't
Mm-hmm.
really realize like this is a problem, like there's
Yeah.
simple things they can do to kind of tweak their meals to make them a lot better, at least from a fat quality, standpoint, right?
Yes. I think that, yes, the healthy fats, and also we got to think about it, is our cells are made of fat,
Yeah.
right? So what kind of fat are we ingesting? And is the cells, the membrane of our cells are fats.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, can we think about the quality, and can we think about the quantity, and, and all that? And then obviously there's different type of fats, and I think it's a concern when is one macronutrients, proteins, carbs, and fats.
Right.
And like you said, some fruits and vegetables are, water soluble. Okay, great.
Yeah.
But a lot of them are fat soluble.
Exactly.
So we need the fat.
Yeah.
So let's choose that fat. And that's part of education that we do, with our clients, and say, hey, there is this kind of fat. So evaluate what you're eating, from a macro standpoint, from the quality of the foods, ensure that you're getting a more balanced, could be a balanced way, for us to kind of put a plate together. So you actually can go to a fat burning state where you consume the foods, you don't raise your blood sugar too high, so you stay not cranky, you're not going to be hungry in a couple hours, right? You're not going to be craving, you have energy, and then after a couple hours, the body's going to do its thing, it's going to turn to shift to burn fat, which when we talk about weight loss, I think most people are thinking it's actually shed some fat, right? So, all right. So once we do that, then that's great. And then after 4 or 5 hours or 6, okay, we eat again and we go through that. Yes. And while we do this, we're keeping our hormones balanced. Right. We're keeping our glucose balanced, our insulin balanced, right? Yet, obviously, the diet is not going to quick fix everything in a heartbeat here. We still have to dig down to see what the imbalances potentially are there. Because if somebody's insulin resistant, well, might be a minute, right? And how do we know that? Well, we know that by looking at the blood work and assessing, some markers that oftentimes are not even evaluated. They're not even, done. So we're looking into, okay, let's find the physiology over here. Let's find what's on the way for you actually to eat healthy foods, break down those foods, absorb the foods and feel the benefits of it. Yay!
Yeah. Oh, for sure, Maria. And this is kind of actually a nice transition into the continuous glucose monitor, right? Because I think that's a tool that you like to use at times. I personally actually have never, full disclosure, used one before.
Really?
'Cause yes, because I myself personally, I've just never needed to because I mean
Uh-huh.
maybe I've got sugar handling issues. I can't say I'm not tracking every day, but like, I think just being in the realm of being so focused on gut health, it isn't typically the primary concern. But I do
Mm-hmm.
think some people listening might be really interested in that because it still kind of is like a big deal, like a fad, right? That
Mm-hmm.
people kind of glom onto these things and be like, well, this is so interesting. I can eat a banana with a meal and see if it spikes my glucose or not. So like maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, and you know what? I got one to show in
Oh,
case you see
nice.
this is I'm not gonna open here, but this is the little container, and we stick kind of on the arm or the belly. It stays in for normally 14 days, and I might have mentioned this last time, but if I could give tools or labs to anybody for free, I would do two things. I would do a stool test to every single
Yeah.
person, and I would put them in CGMs, continuous glucose monitor, because it's continuously measuring your glucose. And you're sleeping, awake, whatever the heck you're doing, the thing is doing it, and allows us to really identify how our glucose is responding to multiple things beyond diet. But yes, the food is the major thing, right? But how is stress? Is how we're receiving stress? How is that impacting our glucose? Is sleep or lack of sleep or good sleep?
Mhm.
Meditation, exercise, and all those kind of things we can see in that little device, which I love it. I freaking love it. It's yes, I used to be pre-diabetic. That's what led me to eventually turn my career around, and my health around. And
Yeah.
when I started paying attention to that, so my first thing of learning was insulin resistance. That's what, became an insulin resistant coach. And then eventually I did the CGMs, that was much later. I think 2017 is maybe the first time I did one or something like that. It's been a while.
Okay.
But yes, it gives us incredible amount of insights to the body, because now you learn. It's countless the times that when I'm working with my clients and they are using the CGM, and I says we're just gonna play, and they're like, what do you mean? It says, I just want you to eat whatever the heck you want, and I want you to learn from it. And then, use the first CGM just to do that. Some people freak out. The women freak out. They
Oh,
freak out.
that.
No. I said, no, no, no. What have you not been eating that you would like to test
Right.
it? Look, you're not going to die. You're not going to go into any diabetic coma or anything like that, right? Based on what we know about the person, is just let's go and become aware. I like to use one CGM just to raise awareness and educate people. And then I sit down, look at the graphs, start educating them on all these steps. And then what we do next, we start, okay, now learning about macronutrients, what is foods, how to put things together, what you tested, how you responded. Now we can tweak things. And it's not to say that a tool like this is to say, oh, you're never going to eat this again if it spikes your blood sugar. No, we're going to learn how to do better with that food, when to eat that food, right? So it's not like to eliminate foods, but certain foods you might say, oh my God, no, I don't want to do this anymore. And I said, hold on a second. Let's not freak out quite yet. You know what I'm saying?
Oh,
So
for
yeah, and that once, and you and I know that metabolic health is really the foundation of health.
it's
And there is so much conversation about metabolic health now. And that for me has been always my number one thing of helping my, raise awareness. And when we have a tool like a CGM, and you pair that with a stool test
it's
and blood work,
yes.
and if possible genetics, oh boy, you're doing great. We're gonna have so much fun now. You know
Oh,
what I'm saying?
for sure. Well, and the thing of it is, it's so interesting, Maria, because like in the beginning, obviously you can use diet to try to stabilize blood sugar, right? Like
Yep.
it's absolutely a proposal, but often just by working on improving digestion.
Mhm.